Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Dear oh dear. How's the sound? Is the sound alright? Sorry about that. I'm just checking my Twitter. OJ Simpson's asking the new owner of Twitter, aka Elon Musk, if he can be verified. Verify OJ ASAP. How is everybody doing today? Everybody good? Got Eddie Hills in the chat. It was eggs. Case closed. Absolutely. Listen, I believe in Conor Benn's innocence. I don't know about you. I've said it from the start. Conor Benn's innocent. Accidentally took ate some eggs that were contaminated with Clomid, and that's how we're in this whole situation. But that's not what we're going to be talking about today. Today we're going to be talking about an IFL TV interview. Yet again, Eddie Hearn has given 26 minutes and 57 seconds to the modern day Jeremy Paxman, the modern day Andrew Neil of interviewing in the British boxing sphere. Of course, it must be Cougan Cassius, aka the Cleanup Man. Cougs, aka the Cleanup Man. Whenever Matchroom need their shit cleaned up, bring in the Cleanup Man, Cougs, yeah, for a nice softball interview. But I tell you what, there were some absolute gems in this interview. Gem number one, Eddie Hearn was questioned about why he hasn't appeared on TalkSport, or why every time he appears on TalkSport, Simon Jordan's never in the same room. Now, I don't follow the TalkSport schedule, but someone said to me that when Eddie Hearn did his recent interview with Laura Woods, right? Apparently, all he had to do was wait another half an hour, 60 minutes, and then he would have been in the same room as Simon Jordan, and him and Simon Jordan could have had a little chat. But Eddie seemed to miss Simon Jordan there, didn't he? So these two seem to keep missing each other. It's like every time Eddie seems to appear on TalkSport, Simon Jordan ain't in the building. We're very convenient, isn't it? Seeing as Simon Jordan's one of the few people out there in the media right now who is able to ask the right and proper questions of Eddie Hearn. So how does Eddie Hearn react? He challenges Simon Jordan to a boxing fight. In this interview that you can see on your screen today, Eddie Hearn goes in, reacts to Conor Benn latest, and slams obnoxious Simon Jordan. He's challenged Simon Jordan to a boxing fight. What did he say? It's for charity. You know the classic passive aggressive. Do you know what I mean? Like, press one if you know what I'm talking about. Do you know when you get these people and they're quite passive aggressive, and then they'll say some shit like, "Oh well, if you want, we could go and have a fight about it." Do you know what I mean? Oh, only joking. You met them kind of people that come up with that kind of shit. Oh, if you want, we can go outside and have a little fight if you want, or we can go outside and sort it outside. Only joking, I can't really fight. What are you getting wound up for? What are you getting upset for? You know them kind of passive-aggressive people where they want to be tough, but they're not quite sure if they can hold a shot. Do you know what I mean? They want to go the full caboose, but they're not really sure if they can actually like hold the shot in it. So they try and preface it. Yeah, you know, if you want, we can go outside, innit? If you want, we can do a charity boxing match, you know? Well, I can't fight, but yeah, I'll get in the ring, I'll have it. What do you want to get in the ring with Simon Jordan for? Why would you organise a charity boxing match with Simon Jordan instead of just going on TalkSport, confronting him, yeah, saying what you have to say and answering the questions that he has to ask? Kind of a sign that he's rattled, isn't it, in my opinion? What do you think about that? Gary Harrison says, resorting to violence rather than proving him wrong. Fucking joke, Hearn. And Hearn did dress it up as a joke, didn't he? I'm tempted to play the footage from IFL TV. I'm tempted to play the footage from IFL TV, but I'll have a think about it. But do you know what? Should we just play the footage from IFL TV? Give me a sec, yeah? Just give me a second. We'll put this footage on. Hold on. For those who missed it and you don't believe what I'm saying, let's just let me just see what's going on here. I'll have to find the exact part, but yeah. Jack Simpson said he's in his late 40s trying to fight a radio host. He's absolutely rattled. Oh, look, he tried to dress it up as a joke, but Why would you go? He was talking about how, you know, him and Simon Jordan can get in the box ring if they want and sort it out for charity. Well, why would you do that, Eddie? Why don't you just go on Talk Sport and confront him? Eddie, you can call in Talk Sport right now. You ain't got to wait for a charity boxing match. What you got to wait for a charity boxing match for? For what? For what reason? Well, what do you need a charity boxing match for, mate? Just call him up right now and Talk Sport. You've got his phone number. Phone him up right now. DM him. Why have you got to go on IFL TV? Do you know, if you want to sort something out with somebody, it's very simple. Just ring them up direct and sort it out. Ain't got to be done on YouTube. You know all this fucking YouTube beef? People calling each other out on YouTube and shit. Making videos about each other on YouTube. No need for any of that. There's no need to get anybody involved, really. You just fucking message the person directly and say, look, do you want to meet up one-on-one? It's not a problem. I wouldn't do it. Because I'd probably lose. And if I didn't lose, I'll probably be facing assault charges. What do you guys think about that? Let me ask you a question about this guy. Former boxer Eddie Hearn. He says he wants to, wouldn't mind having a scrap with Simon Jordan. How does he explain these photos in GQ magazine, which appeared in the last month or so? Eddie Hearn versus the haters. Does this look like a man who's ready to step in a ring for a charity boxing match anytime soon? The guy can't make up his mind. 1 minute he's dressed up looking like... 1 minute he's taking pictures like this. And then the next minute he's on IFL TV saying he wants to fight Simon Jordan in a charity boxing match. Can you make up your mind, Eddie? Like, are you face or are you a heel? I don't think he even knows himself. Are you a face, Eddie, or a heel? 1 minute you're turning up to GQ magazine. Look at this shit. Has Simon Jordan seen these pics? Look. Is this what gangsters in Essex do? Just out of interest, can I ask you? Do you know all these cheeky chappy gangsters from Essex, like Eddie Hearn? Because you know Eddie Hearn's like a proper cheeky chappy, isn't he? Like he's a proper hardcore tough Essex gangster, isn't he? He knows really tough people, isn't he? Right? Is this how they all behave down in Essex? Like 1 minute they're sort of handing out passive aggressive threats to people, and then 2 seconds later they're in GQ magazine taking pictures, yeah, with a come on, man. Look at this here. Oh my gosh, what do you guys think, man? Who advised him to do these photos? I can't work it out. Like, what are you, Eddie? Are you a tough guy? What are you? Are you a tough guy ex-amateur fighter? Or are you just, you know, a rich kid who went to boarding school, who inherited daddy's business? I can't work out how you turn up on GQ magazine looking like this, and then fucking couple months later you're calling people out for charity boxing fights with a straight face. Look at look at this one. Fuck, he looks like fucking Timmy Mallet there, didn't he? Don't let Simon Jordan see these photos. He'll be shook if he sees this. He'll be absolutely shook if Simon Jordan will be shook up if he sees these photos. Look at this. Who advised him? No, seriously, we'll get on to the main content of the show. But seriously, 80 people in the chat, yeah? Please hit the like button. If you'd like to be part of the chat, please feel free to subscribe. I'm just saying, look, I'm not the one calling Simon Jordan out for a fight. That's what he did. He said, look, you know, get it on in a charity boxing ring. So what? He's a fighter now, yeah? I don't know any fighters who do photo shoots looking like this. I've run into plenty of fighters in my time. Not... They won't be caught dead in photos like this, mate. So I'm just telling you, like, I've run into plenty of fighters in my time, yeah? They'd rather eat shit fresh out of a toilet bowl than be photographed looking like this on GQ magazine. These photos are so dodgy. Is it even GQ? Could be another kind of magazine. What kind of magazine is this? GQ, yeah? What possessed this man to do this? Sorry. I just found that ironic. I heard him calling out Simon Jordan for that charity. I just thought, what kind of tough guy do you know that be taking pics like this, though? Is there any more, or is that it? That's it. Jesus fucking Christ almighty. His jumper is from Tiger of Sweden, and it's £279. Shall I give you guys a quick tip about clothing? I don't know if Eddie Hearn's listening to the show, but let me give you a very, very quick tip about clothing, and then we'll move on to the meat and bones of his interview with Kugan Cassius, because he has said some things in his interview which are very, very, very questionable. And we'll talk about why he's upset with Simon Jordan, and we'll talk about his comments about Conor Benn and the BBOC. But I just want to say quickly, quick tip, yeah, for those of you who think that you need to buy designer clothes. Here's a tip. You don't, and this is someone who, I haven't got a lot of money at all, right? Do I have £5,000 to spend on a Beluti jacket? Well, yes, technically I do have the money, but I don't have a lot of money. Could I spend that on a jacket? Yes, I could. Would it make me homeless? No, it wouldn't. Would it be one of the dumbest things I've ever done? Yes, it would be. Do I have a lot of money? No, I don't. Do I look better than this? Possibly. Here's the reason why. If you go to the gym, you don't have to look like a bodybuilder. But if you go to the gym and just get a little bit of shape, just a little bit, if you just go to the gym on a regular basis and just get just a little bit of shape, plus maybe just lift a couple of tiny weights and do a little bit of dumbbells, yeah? You can look top quality in a Primark t-shirt that costs £2.99. Do you know why? Because it's what's underneath the t-shirt that counts. You don't need to look. Eddie Hearn, unfortunately, he's got a bit of a dad bod, hasn't he? No disrespect. He's got a dad bod. So obviously, that's the reason why he's wearing jackets that are, you know, $5,500. And let's be honest, I mean, he looks like a pair of curtains in that jacket. Do you think that's a fair comment? I mean, I'm not sure how Beluti feel with him wearing that there, but he's made that jacket look a bit second rate there, to be honest. Not no shape, see? Now, if you had a bit of shoulders and a neck, if you went to the gym and he lifted a few more weights and got that neck up, look a bit better in it, then you wouldn't have to wear a $5,500 jacket to cover your dad bod. But that's just me. It is what it is. I don't know what you think about that. It is what it is. Shout out to Wayne Alexander. I'll go with Eddie on this one. Listen, Wayne Alexander, I've still got Tunde Ajayi on the lookout for you because you picked Lyndon Arthur to beat Anthony Yard. Wayne Alexander. Haven't seen you on that channel. Haven't seen you on a channel since then, Wayne Alexander. But I'm letting you know that Tunde is looking for you. He told me. Came on a channel and he said, when I see Wayne Alexander, tell him. I know he picked Lyndon Arthur. Shout out to Wayne Alexander, man. Former British and European champion. Let's talk about the meat and bones, right, of what Eddie Hearn said and why Eddie Hearn is upset with Simon Jordan. And we're going to talk about, do you think, who's in the right and who's in the wrong? Let's talk about this. He said today, and this is interesting, he said he felt Simon Jordan's criticism of him was unfair. He said, and I've almost got him on a word-for-word quote here, he said, contractually, we cannot cancel the fight. We are not the regulatory body. The opponent or the BBOC can cancel the fight. I'm only joking, Wayne. You know, we discussed it before. Tunde said said you're a good mate of his, and he said, say hello. I'm just stirring the pot. Tell you what, Wayne, if anybody's going to get a slap off Tunde and Spencer Fearing, it's me. And we'll talk about that another time. So, yeah, Eddie Hearn said, contractually, we cannot cancel the fight. We are not the regulatory body. The opponent or the BBOC can cancel the fight. Now, I think that's a little bit dishonest, and I'll tell you why. The real reason why people like Simon Jordan and people like myself have been critical of Eddie Hearn is the following, right? We're not criticising Eddie Hearn because we're saying that he is contractually obligated to step in and cancel the fight. What we're saying is, given his previous and well-documented stance on performance-enhancing drugs and drug testing, we're saying that he's a hypocrite. That's all we're saying. We're not saying he's the only ones that are to blame. I'm not saying that the British Boxing Board of Control are blameless, and I'm not saying it's all Eddie Hearn's fault. But Eddie Hearn's saying the criticism of him is unfair because contractually, he can't cancel the fight. We've never asked Eddie Hearn. No one here has ever said that Eddie Hearn is contractually obligated to cancel Conor Benn versus Chris Eubank. What we've said, though, is the following, and here's what I'm going to say. Given your previous comments on performance-enhancing drugs, most notably this one here, what do you guys think of this one? This is Eddie Hearn, 5th of August 2012. This is Eddie Hearn 10 years ago. Any athlete that tests positive twice should be banned for life, in my opinion. Those aren't my words. Those are the words of Eddie Hearn, 5th of August 2012 on Twitter. Any athlete that tests positive twice should be banned for life. If you add that to some of the additional comments he's made about wanting to imprison fighters who have been found to be taking performance-enhancing drugs, when we look at his previous comments that somebody's going to die in the ring and questioning if a boxer gets in the ring with another boxer and he's doped up and that boxer gets killed, should that fighter then be charged with murder? These are all Eddie Hearn's talking points. These aren't my talking points. What myself and Simon Jordan are actually saying here is that Eddie Hearn's actions haven't backed up his rhetoric on performance-enhancing drugs. And I will say this, and I hope this is a fair comment. Press 1 if you think this is a fair comment, and press 2 if you think I'm way off on this. Eddie Hearn may not have been contractually able to cancel the fight. But let me tell you something here. He could have used his influence to stop the fight from happening. Do you not think that? He could have turned around and said, do you know what? I'm on record as saying any fighter that tests positive twice should be banned for life. Given what I've said about this in the past, given what I've said about Vada testing being the gold standard, given what I've said about, given that I've equated boxers who have gone in the ring on performance-enhancing drugs with murderers, that's what Eddie Hearn's done. Eddie Hearn has equated boxers who get in the ring on performance-enhancing drugs, he's equated them with murderers and suggested that they should do prison time. I'm not talking about contractual obligations, and nor is Simon Jordan. We're talking about moral obligations. You owe it to yourself if you have any consistency, and you owe it to the fighter to do as much as you can to make sure this fight couldn't happen. And there's no way anybody can tell me that Eddie Hearn and Matchroom Boxing had absolutely no influence over whether that fight did or did not happen. Eddie Hearn could have turned around and released a statement and said, I don't want anything to do with this fight. Could he not have? Press 1 if you agree, press 2 if you disagree. Eddie Hearn could have released a statement. If he didn't want the fight to go ahead, but he was contractually unable to stop the fight from going ahead, he could have released a statement and said, contractually, it's not in my power to stop this fight from happening. But I tell you what, I don't want anything to do with it. I don't want anything to do with it because Conor Benn has had 2 adverse findings on a Vada test inside 2 months. And given my stance on drug testing and given my stance on boxing being a clean sport, I wouldn't feel comfortable being front and center and being the lead promoter on an event like that. So I'm going to step away. If this event is going to take place, this event can take place. But I'm going to step away. I don't want any part of it. Could have gone to the Zone and said, you know what, the Zone? I'm not comfortable with this. I'm not comfortable with putting Chris Eubank Jr., who's just had to make 157 pounds, a weight that he hasn't had to make in years. He's only allowed to rehydrate 3 or so pounds in the next 12 to 24 hours. This fight was already seen by many as a dangerous fight. Even before we knew that Conor Benn had 2 different Vada test issues. Now that we found out Conor Benn has issues, the Zone, I'm not comfortable being a part of this. And I would advise you not to broadcast this fight. Press 1 if you agree with me there and press 2 if you disagree with me. Yeah, contractually, you might not have been able to pull the fight. But you were definitely able to influence it. You were definitely able to influence it. Also, look at this. Speaking of influence. And I've got the bloody wrong statement up here. So you'll have to bear with me. This isn't the correct statement. I've got the wrong statement up here. All right. He then turned around and he said he tried to offload the blame onto the British Boxing Board of Control. He said that, and he's got some points here. He said that the British Boxing Board of Control were given all the information. We'll get onto that in a second about what information they were given and what information they weren't given, right? We'll get onto that, and I will go through your comments. Just let me go through this section of the show, and then I'll go through all your comments. If you like what you're hearing, please feel free to hit the like button. If there's anything you'd like me to point out, let me know and I'll point it out. And if you want to be part of the chat, please feel free to subscribe. So let me just go through my points and then we'll all have a chat about this. He said that the British Boxing Board of Control should take the blame for having all the information and failing to make a decision. Failing to make a decision. He said, I'm not the regulatory body. I'm not the regulatory body. The British Boxing Board of Control is the regulatory body. Here's my issue with that. What obstruction did the British Boxing Board of Control face from people that were on Conor Benn's side? That's a question. That's not an allegation. Let me say that again. I wonder what obstruction the British Boxing Board of Control faced from Conor Benn's side to potentially putting a stop to this fight. Eddie Hearn wants us to believe this is a very, very simple saga. He wants us to believe that this has got nothing to do with me. I can't contractually cancel the fight. It's all on the British Boxing Board of Control. It's down for them to do it. We provided all the information for them and they took their time. Well, here's my first question. Did you threaten the British Boxing Board of Control with legal action at any point? And if you did, do you think that might have something to do with why this dragged out for some time? I'm just trying to get up this official statement, which I now have here on the screen, from Matcham and Wasserman. Because when the British Boxing Board of Control made their decision, Eddie Hearn and Matcham refused to accept it. So the point I'm trying to make here is the following. Listen to this. This is their statement. This is from Matcham and Wasserman, I believe. It's undeniable that the British Boxing Board of Control's decision to withdraw their sanctioning was procedurally flawed and without due process. That remains a legal issue between the promoters and the board, which we intend to pursue. So it's very, very simple, isn't it? It's not just a simple case like Eddie Hearn's making out of, we provided the British Boxing Board of Control with all the information and it's down to them to make a decision and we'll follow their decision. Because when the British Boxing Board of Control did the right thing, they were threatened with legal action. This is what I say makes sense. Press 7 if that made sense and press 8 if I'm talking garbage. I'm pushing back on this narrative that Eddie Hearn's pushing out here. That this is all the a lot of this is on the British Boxing Board of Control. And that all Matcham and Conor Benn's team did was provide them with the relevant information. And then all the British Boxing Board of Control had to do was to decide whether to put the fight on or not. And he's basically kind of insinuating that they would have been happy with whatever decision the British Boxing Board of Control made. Well, that wasn't the case. I have a feeling there were significant obstructions that were put in place. That's my gut feeling. My gut feeling is that there were significant obstructions that were put in place to make sure that this fight went ahead. I believe that there were significant obstructions that went ahead to make sure that the British Boxing Board of Control couldn't just turn around and say, this fight's off. And the reason why I believe that is because when the British Boxing Board of Control finally made the right decision on October the 4th and said, this fight shouldn't take place because it's not in the interest of boxing, did Eddie Hearn and Matcham turn around and say the following? Did they say, do you know what? We're okay with that. We agree with that. That's fine. Did they say, do you know what? It's a fair decision. Conor has had a problem with a drug test. It's too dangerous for Chris. It's too dangerous for Chris Eubank Jr. We've been waiting a couple of weeks now for the British Boxing Board of Control to make the decision. They've made the decision, and now we respect their decision. Did Eddie Hearn say that? Did Matchroom and Wasserman say that in their statement? No, they did not. Instead, they said they called the British Boxing Control's decision to withdraw their sanctioning procedurally flawed, without due process, and said that remains a legal issue between the promoters and the board, which we intend to pursue. So quite simply, here's my point, right? The reason why Eddie Hearn's getting flack from myself and the reason why Eddie Hearn's getting flack from Simon Jordan is because if you look at the statements that have been released, the interviews that have been given, all right, and all the evidence that we have so far leading up to the run-up of this fight, they all indicate that Eddie Hearn wanted this fight to take place. And that he intended for this fight to take place despite knowing that Conor Benn had had more than one adverse finding on a drugs test. And that's why he's been criticised. Don't fall for the straw man arguments. Nobody's making the argument that he was contractually obligated to cancel the fight. People are making the argument that he's a hypocrite because his actions don't match up with what he said about doping in boxing in the past. And they said there was a moral obligation for him to look after the well-being of Chris Eubank. And I just want to quickly say something as well before we get on to something else. One more time. I made this point before, but I just want to make this comment again. So just bear with me. I just want to get this article up. And it's Eddie Hearn's comments on Chris Eubank Senior. And I want you to listen to this. Eddie Hearn hits back at very stubborn Chris Eubank Senior after he called for a boycott of his own son's fight against Conor Benn over fears about his weight cut, as he insists Junior knows what he signed up for. I'd like Eddie Hearn to ask this question. Look at this. Look at this stuff. I'm going to quote Eddie Hearn. This is unbelievable. This is Eddie Hearn on Chris Eubank Senior's worries about his son's safety. Can you believe this stuff? I think he's very stubborn, he told IFL TV. He made some comments a couple of weeks ago about the weight. Don't forget, Eubank Senior knew about this fight. He knew about the weight, and Chris Jr. signed for the fight. There wasn't any major concerns then. Look at this stuff. Look. So I don't really see the concern. The bigger danger, in all honesty, is Conor Benn. This is a 147 pound. This is a 147 pounder who's coming up to 157 pounds. He's at a massive disadvantage, but there has to be a middle ground. Just look at these statements he's made. So this article was dated October the 4th, 2022. Here's my question to you guys. Again, do you think Eddie Hearn owes Chris Eubank Senior a public apology? For turning around and calling him very, very stubborn, for being concerned about his own son's safety, and then turning around and saying the bigger danger was with Conor Benn, knowing the whole time that Conor Benn had had multiple adverse findings for clomidopine. I think that's fucking sick, to be honest. I don't know what you guys think about that. I think that's fucking sick. You've got two guys getting in a ring, and the father of one of the fighters is incredibly concerned about his son's safety. And you criticise the father for being concerned about the safety of his son. And you're trying to put a boxer in with his son who you know has had 2 adverse findings for Clomid in the space of 2 months? I think he owes Chris Eubank Senior a public apology, and I think that's a question that should be asked about that. How could you dismiss Chris Eubank Senior's concerns for his son's safety when you sat there the whole time and knew that his opponent had had problems and had adverse findings in multiple fucking drug tests? Let's move on to what he said today. And just to make clear about my next point, let me finish off this point. So he said it's down to the BBOC to take action. That's what he said. He said, I'm not the regulatory body. It's down for the British Boxing Board of Control to take action. Well, when he gets questioned by somebody who actually knows what they're talking about, not me, not Kugan Cassius, not Umar Ahmed, but when he gets questioned by somebody who actually knows the right questions to ask and knows a lot more about this than me, I'd like to find out if it was as simple as Eddie Hearn's making out, or was the British Boxing Board of Control threatened with legal action and did lawyers get involved? And the reason why I say that and ask that question is, wasn't there the rumour that we didn't find out about Conor Benn's first adverse finding in that Vada test that he took back in July? The reason we didn't find out about that was because there was some kind of injunction, or because lawyers had got involved and were determined to seal the case and make sure that it never got out into public light. Isn't that the case? Isn't that right? Isn't that the reason why we didn't hear about the first test problem that Conor Benn had back in the July the 25th? Isn't that because there was some kind of legal standoff? Let me know if I've got that wrong. That's what I thought I heard people say, that there was some kind of injunction or there was some kind of legal procedure involving his lawyers and the WBC, and they were trying to make sure that the information didn't get out into public light. So really, was it just as simple as the BBOC were presented with all the evidence and they could just make a decision? Or were the British Boxing Board of Control presented with evidence, but did lawyers get involved? And did lawyers say to them, this is what you need to do? And if you do this, because if you look at this statement, they were threatened with legal action. Once they finally pulled the fight, they were threatened with legal action. So I think there may have been some obstructions. Now, let's move on to the actual Eddie Hearn's defense of Conor Benn taking performance-enhancing drugs. There's some really, really interesting stuff. Just stay with me. I'm only going to ramble on for another couple of minutes and then we'll take all of your comments, okay? So bear with me. I can see your comments, okay? He said, this is really interesting in this interview. He said, Clomid stays in your system for 10 months when used for the benefit of being performance enhancing. So part of his defense for why he felt that Conor Benn didn't intentionally take any performance enhancing drugs, and I have no idea, I'm not accusing Conor Benn of anything. I have no idea what Conor Benn did. All I'm doing is reporting on what Eddie Hearn said on IFL TV. He said, part of the reason why he's so convinced about the innocence of Conor Benn is because he said, Clomid stays in the system 10 months when used for the benefit of being performance enhancing. Basically, he turned around and said he'd be an absolute idiot to take this. That's what Eddie Hearn's trying to advance the case of. He's saying if Conor Benn wanted to use Clomid for performance enhancing reasons, with the amount he'd have to put in his system to get a performance enhancing benefit, he'd have the stuff in his system for up to 10 months. So why then would he offer to do drug testing? That's the kind of case that Eddie Hearn's trying to advance. There's just one minor problem there with what Eddie Hearn's saying. Can anybody guess what that is? It isn't even that, Simon H, although you're quite close. Shall I tell you what it is? Who said he was ever taking Clomid for performance enhancing reasons? Who said that? Listen to what Eddie Hearn said. He said Clomid stays in the system for 10 months when used for the benefit of being performance enhancing. Who has ever accused Conor Benn of taking Clomid for the benefit of being performance enhancing? Again, with Eddie Hearn, and this is what I'm saying, He's very, very slippery. And he knows what words he's using. And he's very, very, very clever. The guy's not an idiot. The guy's not an idiot. Let me tell you something right now. If you put me on the live interview with Eddie Hearn would destroy me. I don't think quick enough to be able to keep up with him. If you give me an interview from Eddie Hearn and you give me a couple of hours to pick apart what he said and go and do the research, it's a different story. But in a live interview, he would chew me up and spit me out. Because I don't think fast enough. This is a guy who swims with the sharks. Don't underestimate Eddie Hearn. And don't underestimate his ability to, to misdirect, cause confusion and muddy the waters. He's an absolute expert at doing this. Don't be fooled. Don't think just some random YouTuber off the street is going to put the mic in Eddie Hearn's face and start catching him out. You need somebody very, very skilled, and you need somebody very, very on the ball to catch up to what this guy's saying. But I'm going to repeat that one more time. And this is the problem that we have with Eddie Hearn. Because it feels to me like Eddie Hearn isn't being as truthful as he should be. It seems to me like Eddie Hearn, again, let me say this. We'll go back to my point. The what I'm trying to say is, when you get someone like this who speaks like a politician, who makes up straw man arguments, who answers questions that nobody's asked. You see what he did to Simon Jordan? He's saying, I don't know why Simon Jordan's upset at me. I wasn't contractually obligated to cancel the fight. Nobody ever argued that you were contractually obligated to cancel the fight. You see this here? Same with this one here. You see this? Clomid stays in the system for 10 months when used for the benefit of being performance enhancing. But Eddie, whoever argued that Conor Benn took Clomid for the benefit of being performance enhancing? Nobody. Nobody that I've heard. If you look at the main use of Clomid, what's the main use? The main use of Clomid is for what's called post-cycle therapy after the person who took it did a side of steroids. And I'm not saying Conor Benn did it for that purpose. What I'm talking about is the primary application of Clomid. From what I have seen, and from what people who have used it in this chat, and from what I've seen on bodybuilding forums and muscle forums, the primary use of Clomid is not for raw performance enhancing benefits. Primary use of Clomid, if I'm wrong, I'll correct this, but as far as I'm aware, the primary use of Clomid is for post-cycle therapy. It's to get your body producing testosterone again after you've just done a cycle of steroids, of anabolics. So again, he's answering questions and making points that nobody's made. Nobody said, Eddie, that Clomid was being used by Conor Benn for the benefit of being performance enhancing. And because of that, Eddie, right? Because of that, Eddie, what that means is your 10 months in the system thing doesn't really hold any weight with me. Clomid would be in your system for 10 months if you used it for the benefits of being performance enhancing. Well, I've got news for you, Eddie. The accusations are that Conor Benn may have been using it for post-cycle therapy. Not that he was using it purely for the benefits of being performance enhancing. So I'm not sure if that 10 months in the system applies to Conor Benn. From what I've looked at online, it's nowhere near 10 months. But I'm not a scientist. And that's what people like Simon H are alluding to in the chat. Again, I suppose it depends how much of it you take and what you're using it for. But in terms of how long it takes Clomid to clear the system completely, some of the stuff that we've seen goes from 3 to 4 months. I have yet to see anything about 10 months. And here's my next question to Eddie Hearn on that. You're saying Clomid stays in the system for 10 months when used for the benefit of performance enhancing. So again, he's pretty much saying that he doesn't believe that Conor Benn intentionally took Clomid because it would be a schoolboy error. He's basically saying, why would Conor Benn take something that would stay in his system for 10 months? He'd be bound to fail a drugs test. This is very important now, because this point's very important. Press 1 if you're still with me, and press 2 if I've lost you. Because I do ramble on a bit. But press 1 if you're still with me, and press 2 if I've lost it a bit. But this is the point he's trying to make. He's trying to say, it feels to me like he's trying to say, look, why would Conor Benn take Clomid? He knows it's going to be in his system for 10 months. If he takes it, he's bound to fail a drugs test. He can't be that stupid. In fact, the exact quote that Eddie Hearn used was, I was told only a brain-dead moron would take this. That's a direct quote from Eddie Hearn. I was told only a brain-dead moron would take this. So here's my next question to Eddie Hearn. It seems like you're implying that there's no way Conor Benn took this intentionally, because it would have been in his system for up to 10 months and he would have failed, all his subsequent drug tests. So he would have been stupid for taking it. So here's the question, Eddie. How come he passed his UKAD tests? How did he pass his UKAD test, Eddie? How did he pass those UKAD tests? It's interesting, isn't it? He turned around and he basically said he doesn't believe that Conor Benn would have taken this performance enhancing drug intentionally. He said he was told only a brain-dead moron would take this stuff. He's insinuating that you have to be stupid to take this drug, because it stays in your system for so long when you use it for performance-enhancing benefits that, you have a very, very little chance of passing a drug test. So how did Conor Benn pass his UKAD test then, Eddie? If only a brain-dead moron would take this stuff, because this stuff stays in your system for so long, how did he pass his UKAD tests? It's one of two things, isn't it, Eddie? Is it that the UKAD test didn't pick it up and the Vada ones did? Is that what it is, mate? See, he's trapped himself. Can only be one of two things here. Even the UKAD tests, even he's basically admitting that the UKAD tests aren't as good as the Vada tests, because he's saying that if Conor Benn took this stuff for performance-enhancing reasons, this stuff should have been in his system for up to 10 months. Well, Eddie, if he's passed the UKAD tests, what does that tell you? If he's passed the UKAD test, does that tell us that maybe UKAD can't find this stuff, but the Vada test can? Is that what you're saying, Eddie? Because if that's what you're saying, why did you then come out and try to say that Conor Benn passing his UKAD test is mitigating circumstances for failing a Vada test? Look at this statement from Matchroom Wazaman. Mr. Benn has since passed a doping control test conducted by the UK Anti-Doping Agency. How many times did we hear Eddie Hearn say that? Well, he's passed his UKAD tests. One minute you're saying he's passed his UKAD tests. The next minute you're turning around and saying that this is the stuff that stays in your system for 10 months when taken for performance-enhancing reasons. So Conor Benn would be stupid to take it. So either you're saying that the UKAD tests are inaccurate, or, either you're saying that the UKAD tests are inadequate and that we shouldn't listen to you when you say Conor Benn has passed his UKAD tests even though he's failed his Vada ones, because because he had Clomid in his system and the UKAD test didn't pick it up but the Vada ones did. So either you were wrong when you turned around and told us that the fact that he passed his UKAD tests was some kind of mitigating circumstance that could help prove his innocence, or something else. Did that make sense what I was saying? Richard, did I make sense there? Very, very interesting, isn't it? I thought that there. He said, why would Conor Benn take Clomid? He basically said, why would Conor take Clomid? The stuff would be in his system for 10 months. He'd be stupid to take it. Only a brain-dead moron would take this. Well, he passed his UKAD tests, so he must not be that stupid, mustn't he, Eddie? Something must have gone right because he passed his UKAD test, didn't he? So what's the problem, Eddie? How did he pass his UKAD test when this stuff should have been in the system for 10 months? How did he pass his UKAD test? Does that mean that UKAD don't test for this stuff? Be interesting, isn't it, if UKAD didn't test for this stuff or if UKAD didn't pick this stuff up? What do you guys think is a more... I've got to be careful what I say, but what do you guys think is a more reasonable explanation? What's Richard said here? This is interesting. He said, in all likelihood, the Vada and UKAD tests took place in the same Vada lab with the same people testing them. But how just at different times? I'm not sure. We'll have to see about that. I'm not sure. I wonder what the criteria is. Because I think the Vada have slightly different rules because I don't think Vada... I think what's on the Vada prohibited list... I think there are differences between Vada and WADA, but I don't want to get into it too much. We'll talk about it offline, Richard, but I think there's slight differences between Vada and WADA. Right, let's move on because I don't want to think. By the way, based on Eddie Hearn's comments that only a brain dead moron would take this, Brock Lesnar and John Jones also took this stuff. Just a quick one. When Brock Lesnar and John Jones got caught with Clomid, were they eating dodgy eggs as well? Just out of interest, I'm just asking for anybody who knows. You know when Brock Lesnar and John Jones got caught with this stuff in their system? Did they get that from eggs, yeah? Or chicken meat? How did they get it in their system? Just out of interest. So, those are my points really about Eddie Hearn's interview with IFL TV. I thought there was some very, very interesting things said about that there. I think the point he made about the 10 months in Conor Benn's system and how, you know, that would somehow mean that he'd be a fool to take it. Now, I'm not sure about that at all. I think we need to find out if the UKAD test would have caught this substance. I think that's the key to it, isn't it? Do you not think that's the key? I'm going to go through questions in a minute. I think we need to know if the UKAD test would have actually picked up what the Vada test would have picked up. That's what we need to know. Are these exactly the same tests? Do these tests look for the same things? Is the criteria for passing and failing exactly the same? I've got my own ideas. I've got to be very careful what I say, but I've got my own ideas. Mitch says, give yourself a pat on the back. That was great insight and Inquisition. Did I even make any sense? I thought I really botched that towards the end, and nobody's really commenting, so I'm not sure if I've completely botched that. But I find it very interesting there. I think that's the most interesting point from the interview, that Eddie Hearn is saying, basically saying that Conor Benn would have to be stupid to take this stuff because it stays in his system for such a long period of time. Should I tell you what I'm concerned about? I'm concerned about this, and here's another way of saying it. If Conor Benn didn't do a Vada test, he would have passed, wouldn't he? Yes or no? That's the impression that I've got from the timelines and these positive tests, isn't it? That's the impression I got. Is that the impression you get? That's the kind of impression I'm getting here. That if Conor Benn just stuck to Vada, if Conor Benn just stuck to the UKAD test, I've got a feeling he'd have passed. Makes sense. Games You Love gets it. Simon H says it. Because he's on record here as saying, isn't he? That I heard he passed his UKAD test, didn't he? So yeah, it's like Eddie Hearn's kind of unintentionally snitched on him there, hasn't he? Because what Eddie Hearn has said is, look, if he's taken this stuff, he'd be stupid because this stuff would have been in his system for such a long period of time. But he passed his UKAD test, Eddie. And do you remember, Conor Benn wasn't even enrolled with Vada XYZ months ago. Do you remember that? Conor Benn wasn't even enrolled with Vada XYZ months ago. So here's the question that needs to be asked. Let's pretend that Conor Benn wasn't in the WBC clean program and didn't have to go through Vada testing. Would he have passed all his UKAD tests and we've never have known about him having Clomid in his system? I think you could get an interesting answer. The point I'm trying to get to here is it a case of contamination? Is it a case of contamination from hens or contamination from eggs? Is it a case that somebody spiked his food? Is it a case that somebody's had a vendetta against him? Is it a case that there was a problem with the lab sample? Is there a case that Vada have made a mistake? Is there some kind of big fuck up here? Or, I'm just asking a question, or is this happening because Conor Benn just started doing Vada tests and before he wasn't doing them? Richard, am I legally okay to say that, Richard? Can you let me know? Am I legally okay to say that? Do you guys understand what I'm saying there? All these bullshit explanations about hens, chicken eggs, the Virgin Mary, contamination, lab tests, B samples, lab contamination, and all these fucking stories, right? And all these stories. Well, he passed all his UKAD tests. He passed all his UKAD tests, and before, he wasn't taking Vada tests. So, if he was just taking UKAD tests again, he'd have been fine. So what's the common denominator in this story? The common denominator in this story is the individual started taking Vada tests, and then the individual started having adverse findings, isn't it? That's the common denominator, isn't it? That's the real common denominator, isn't it? The individual started taking Vada tests, and then the individual started having adverse findings. That's what it seems like to me. Richard, is that all right? Does that make sense, Richard? Because you know a lot more about this than me. Let me know. Let me know if I'm botching this episode up. Right, let's go through your comments. And somebody said all to muddy the waters. And that's the point about why Eddie Hearn's being criticised about this. And somebody pulled me up. My coverage of this has not been perfect. Somebody said to me in a comment, they said, Ultra, why are you going after Eddie Hearn so much and leaving at Kalle Sauerland? You're absolutely correct. I apologise for that. That's wrong. So maybe I'm letting my personal bias get in the way. Feel free to disregard everything I say about this. But please feel free to also hit the like button. I can see we've still got 185 people in here and only 62 likes. Can I ask you a question? Those people who haven't hit the like button yet. What do you want to hear? Do you want to hear another interview with the cleanup man, Kugan Cassius? Is that what you want? What do you want? I'm not exactly journalist of the year. I'm not a journalist. I don't get paid to do this. But what do you want? Do you want coverage like this? Or do you want coverage from Kugan, the cleanup man, Cassius? Host of the new show, Raw, The Fight Within. There you go. I'm going to plug it for IFL TV right now. There you go. Because we know IFL TV, we do like Sonny Edwards, I have to say. Look, Bex Connolly. I'm not very good in relationships. Jesus Christ almighty. I can't believe you let yourself get pictured on IFL TV at the beginning of every single IFL TV interview saying, I'm not very good at relationships. That's not good, is it? Doesn't make you look very good, does it? Yeah, that's it. Relationships are not my forte. How the fuck are you let yourself get plastered all over every single IFL TV worldwide with a grin on your fucking face saying, relationships aren't my forte? Doesn't exactly put you in the best light, does it? But if you're interested in hard-hitting journalism of the best kind, I would advise you to tune into Raw, The Fight Within with Kugan Cassius. Nah, Beck's lovely. I've got a problem with her. Just some bloke says, well, you are on the payroll of Frank Ultra Tech. Well, can you blame me? Just some bloke. Can you blame me? I'm sitting behind a £400 soundbar here. This microphone's nearly 200 quid. And the screen that we're recording this episode on cost over £1,000. The fucking table that I'm resting my arms on was a couple of £100. And I write my notes in a Samsung S6 tablet. And don't be confused, S6 ain't old. The tablets have different numbers to the phones. So I'm writing my notes in a fucking £300 tablet. Would you be on the frat girl on payroll if you got all this kit that I've got? Probably would be, wouldn't you? Probably would be. Right, let's go through some comments. Right, let's go through some comments then, as promised. Here we go. Let me just quickly say this as well before we get on. All right. Kalle Sauerland, in my opinion, is an absolute disgrace. It's not just Eddie Hearn, and I'm wrong for probably putting too much focus on Eddie Hearn and putting zero focus on Kalle Sauerland. I am wrong for doing that, and I apologise live on air for that. I'm wrong. All right? I'm wrong for that. I can admit I'm wrong. I'm not perfect. Do you know what it is with me, though? I'm not charging. Do you know the thing with me is I feel like I'm entitled to be wrong because I'm not charging anybody or making money out of the game. Do you know what I mean? I just do this for a laugh. So, you know, I don't think I have to be 100% correct every time. But I think Kalle Sauerland is a disgrace. Eubank's his own fighter. And the way he's treated him, in my opinion, absolutely unacceptable. You know? Absolutely unacceptable, Kalle Sauerland. I mean, the first time we hear from Kalle Sauerland, he turns around and says that this isn't a performance-enhancing drug. Well, Kalle, you're wrong. It is. It is. Very first thing Kalle Sauerland said, didn't he? He said, this is not a performance-enhancing drug. Kalle, it is a performance-enhancing drug. And I think that, you know, your conduct is absolutely terrible. And you know what? Let me tell you something. I do feel sorry for Kalle Sauerland, to be honest, because he's a man who looks like he's got a lot of personal demons. Do you think that's a fair comment? Press 1 if I've onto something there, or press 2 if you disagree. You know, I think Kalle Sauerland's a man who... let me make this clear. I am not saying I want anything bad to happen to Kalle Sauerland. What I'm saying is, listen, every time I see Kalle Sauerland's name on Twitter trending, I'm half waiting for this guy to, you know, to hear the bad news about him. Do you know what I mean? I mean that in a, you know, I don't want anything to happen to Kalle Sauerland. Every time I see Kalle Sauerland's name come up on Twitter, I'm thinking, is today the day that we're gonna, you know, get the news that he's no longer with us? Because it's only a matter of time with this man, isn't it? And I've said it before, people like to make a laugh and a joke about it, don't they? Look at Kalle, he's buzzing. Look at his eyes. Mate, I'm not joking. I don't think this guy's got too long left for us to go, you know? What do you guys think? Press 1 if you think that's a fair comment, press 2 if you don't. I don't think Kalle Sauerland's got too much long left on this planet. Mate, listen, I'll probably go before he does, right? No question. And I'm not saying I want anything bad to happen to Kalle Sauerland, but I think he needs to make a big change in his lifestyle, you know? He needs to make a big change in his lifestyle. And he needs to give himself a big rethink, you know, because it's not cool, man. Turning up on camera the way he does, sniffing, snorting, his eyes bulging out of his head, and all that kind of shit. Man, that's not cool, man. For me, personally. It's not cool to see a man do like that. Like, Kalle Sauerland is 50 years old. The man ain't in his 20s no more. And I know all about heart problems, trust me. So that's the first thing about Kalle Sauerland. He needs to, you know, clean his act up. No pun intended, you know. But his treatment, I think, of Eubank has been absolutely disgusting, in my opinion, you know. Kalle Sauerland, rightly or wrongly, has come across to many people as being a money-hungry desperado. And I'm just being honest, that's my opinion. I'm not making any legal accusations, I'm just saying. In my opinion, Kalle Sauerland, a guy who at one time, do you remember Kalle? Like 10, 15 years ago, the Kalle brand was like premium, wasn't it? Like Sauerland were massive. Like 15, 20 years ago. You know, around about the time when the Klitschko's were dominating and we had Arthur Abraham and we had all these, you know, things going on in Germany. Do you guys remember Felix Sturm and all these kind of things that were going on? Do you guys remember? Like 15, 20 years ago, the Sauerland brand was premium. I mean, George Grove signed for them over Matchroom. George Groves was advised to sign with Matchroom, and he refused and signed with Sauerland. I mean, they had some pull. 15, 20 years ago, Sauerlands were a big deal. I think they were arguably at one stage the biggest promoters in Europe. I mean, 15, 20 years ago, the Sauerlands were premium. And if you look at the state of them, and if you look at the state of Kalle 15, 20 years later, I have to be honest, Kalle doesn't look very premium anymore. You know, Kalle wears a lot of Stone Island jackets, doesn't he? Kalle's known for wearing a bit of Stone Island, but right now, Kalle looks like something that you'd find on the OAP rack down at Peacock's. 15, 20 years ago, yeah, Kalle Sauerland was Stone Island. Now, Kalle Sauerland's the bottom of the bargain bucket down at the OAP rack on the fucking Peacocks. I mean, that's a guy whose brand's been hit. I mean, he's come across as just money hungry, man. Desperate. Would you agree with that? That Kalle Sauerland's come across as desperate during this whole thing? Do you not think? He's come across as a man who knows that there ain't that many big fights coming his way anytime soon. Let's be honest, innit? Am I right or am I wrong about that? He's a guy who knows. Look, this could be it for a while. You know, there aren't any big blockbuster fights coming his way anytime soon. And I think he got a little bit desperate. And for me, you know, he was willing to do... I mean, listen, he's on record going on ID Boxing all the way up until the day the fight was cancelled. He was on with ID Boxing. And I'm pretty sure he was telling ID Boxing and Rob Tebbett that they were still going to consider getting a foreign regulatory body to come in and do the event instead of the British Boxing Board of Control. And even Eddie Hearn had to distance himself from that at some point. That's how fucking desperate Kalle Sauerland was. Oh my gosh. It's not cool, man. Oh my gosh. It's just not cool. It's really not cool, to be honest. All right, let's go through some comments. Refactor Magic says they are desperate. They need the money. Yes, DJN1. Wouldn't they need work permits for all the foreign boards workers? So a lot of people say that it was never possible for them to actually bring in a foreign body, but they threatened to do so to try and strong arm the British Boxing Board of Control into actually making the fight happen, and that's why they did it. Marco says it's all starting to look like a... Look at the state of Marco in this fucking... in this profile pic. Bloody hell. We might need to give you a Vada test. Have you been on them chicken eggs again? Marco says it's all starting to look like a joke, this boxing game. Honestly, we need Dana White to sort it out. Dana fucking White. Let me tell you something. If you want to see drugs out of boxing, the last person you want to bring in is the UFC people. The UFC's like the Wild West when it comes to fucking doping. Jesus Christ. Oh my gosh. If Conor Benn had got caught with Clomid in the UFC, they probably would have given him a pay rise, wouldn't they? Would have given him a bonus. Jesus Christ almighty. The UFC. Jesus Christ. Those guys. I've got to be careful what I say, but I'm pretty sure a few of them pissed like the Incredible Hulk. Lime green and shit. In the UFC, innit? Let's go through here. I'm just going to go through your comments. So I'm just going to go to some of your comments. Oh, Jesus. Adam says, what do you reckon Kalle's test would come back with? Jesus Christ almighty. Let me go through here. I'm just going through some of these. If anybody's got any comments on the situation, I wanted to get Riku on the show to do this with me, but Riku's busy at the moment. Have you seen Curtis Woodhouse on YouTube? He's been going in on Eddie Hard. Listen, I've spoken to Curtis Woodhouse on the old Twitter many a time. I've got a lot of time for Curtis Woodhouse. Curtis Woodhouse is no fan of Frank Warren whatsoever. I've got a lot of time for Curtis Woodhouse. Let's have a look here. Richard says, the only difference in testing between UKAD and Vada really is WBC clean boxing program rules for when they can test all year round, anytime. UKAD, the camp, know when they'll visit. But I think also UKAD think that certain substances are prohibited all year round. Whereas, excuse me, let me rephrase that. Vada believe that certain substances are prohibited all year round. Whereas UKAD adhere to the Vada prohibited list and the Vada code. And UKAD adhere to the World Anti-Doping Agency code. And the World Anti-Doping Agency code dictates that some substances are only prohibited during competition. And that's what we have with Billy Joe Saunders. And that's why we had the little issue between UKAD and Vada, re Billy Joe Saunders, because Vada think that there's certain substances that should be banned all year round. They've got zero tolerance on certain substances. But anybody that adheres to the World Anti-Doping Code follows a slightly different rule set. So there's slightly different rules on which substances are banned and when they're banned, as far as I'm aware. What do you guys think about... we play this. Get back to Simon Jordan. What do you guys think about Simon Jordan's comments, and how do you think it plays out if Simon Jordan does an interview with Eddie Hearn? These are Simon Jordan's comments about Eddie Hearn. Do you think this was a fair comment? I think this was the comment that really started it off. Simon Jordan calling Eddie Hearn a coward, and I think this was because of his reluctance to do a press conference. It was his reluctance to answer any questions at a press conference. Press 1 if you can hear this. Well, you can't hear it because it's not playing. Let's just try that again. Right, press 1 if you can hear this. Zero, you guys can't hear it. Hold on.
This looks dreadful situation surrounding Joshua. Do you think?
Sorry, I put it on the wrong screen. Sorry about that. Slight technical issues. Let's try that again. This is the comment that started it off. Do you agree with Simon Jordan on this?
Eddie Hearn, I think he's a coward. I think he's got to face the media and ask proper questions, grown-up questions, not those powder puff, pillow-fisted questions that Kugan Cassius put to him.
Yeah.
That were all staged and ultimately not answered. Proper grown-up questions from people that are capable of asking him those questions and then interrogating the answers. What do you think the landscapes look like for Eddie? This looks dreadful situation surrounding the fight that's just been stopped between Conor Benn and Chris Eubank.
Yeah.
It looks disappointing for Fury and Joshua. Do you think Eddie Hearn's got some serious, significant explaining to do in both instances?
100%. It's not, we need some answers.
Let's see if Eddie's got the courage of his convictions to come and answer questions from people that can actually hold a question. Eddie Hearn, I think he's a coward. I think he's got to face...
And that's what started it, didn't it? And it's been kicking off, hasn't it, on IFL TV? Because IFL TV are now upset there. Yeah, he called out Kugan Cassius by name. But I thought when I was calling out Kugan Cassius for a while and saying, with all due respect, he is a dreadful interviewer, right? Thought I was a hater. But yeah, Simon Jordan taking aim there at Kugan Cassius and Eddie Hearn. Said that Kugan Cassius' interview was powder puff questions. And since then, it's all sort of kicked off. And this was my tweet on it. I don't know what you think about this. Because what happened was, Umar Ahmed then called out Simon Jordan on Twitter and said, look, do you want to come on for an interview? Basically saying to Simon Jordan, well, if you think you can do a much better job than us, why don't you come on IFL TV with us and we'll do an interview with you? That's how I read it. Like, Umar did a little bit of a call out there on Simon Jordan. And I love Umar, but I said it here. I said, I love Umar, IFL Umar. But him calling out Simon Jordan for an interview is a bit like me calling out Elon Musk to see who can build the best space rocket. I mean, there's levels to this game, isn't there? And that's what I'm trying to say, innit? There are levels to this game. You know? With all due respect. We know Umar gives it his best and stuff, you know? But there are levels to this game, you know? And them guys, yeah, that's what I'm saying, yeah. Umar wanted to interview Simon Jordan. Yeah, he did. And that wouldn't have been a good idea. Because he would have got called out on his own show and made to look like a fool for asking terrible questions. Exactly. Suicide mission. You need to know the levels, man. Some of these people need to know the levels, man. Do you know what I mean? Certain people need to know the levels. Right, let's finish off by listening to the latest from Simon Jordan. We'll do a bit of a listen along. Hopefully, TalkSport are okay with this. Let's do a little bit of a listen along. This is Simon Jordan's latest comments today on Eddie Hearn. Simon Jordan's now saying exactly what I've been saying for a while. I think Eddie Hearn and Kalle Sauerland have some serious questions to ask. Yesterday, I asked the point that, is there a case for misconduct against Kalle Sauerland and Eddie Hearn? RE violations of the British Boxing Board of Control rules and regulations. I'm not sure, but some of the things that are going on at the minute were very, very questionable. Let's have a listen. Hopefully you can hear this. Press 1 if you can hear this. We'll go through this together. This is Simon Jordan today on TalkSport with Martin Kieran and Jim White. Simon Jordan's saying similar things to what I'm saying here. Despite Eddie Hearn's pleas of innocence and trying to shift the blame onto the BBOC, I would say him and Kalle do need to be held accountable for the fact that Chris Eubank Jr. had to get down to £157 against somebody who had 2 adverse drug test findings.
In a story that's being cobbled together now, is beginning to become littered with half-truths, inconsistencies, misrepresentations, people's behaviours littered with deflection. They're taking swipes at people in the media like me about what colour hair I had 20 years ago and what relationship they had with me, which are all based upon absolute nonsense. And
what do you make of that, incidentally? I noticed Eddie Hearn had a bit of a personal swipe at you.
I think it's deflection. First of all, what he says is rubbish. None of what he said has any fact in it. Second of all, he doesn't know my financial affairs and it's none of his business. And then again, it goes nothing to do with the subject matter. That's wonderful, Eddie. Nothing to do with the subject matter. You told us, I think I'm right, alongside Kalle, the first you knew about a failed positive test was the 23rd of September. Well, that doesn't appear to be true anymore, does it? Because unless Vada's policy changed, we were told very clearly by those around Conor that the process was Vada informed the promoters, the Boxing Board of Control, the other fighter. Well, then they must have done the same thing with the July test, which we're being told came out at the end of August. I would be surprised it took a month for it to come out. But let's just say we go down the route of these seemingly inconsistencies and agree to that position of it coming out at the end of August. Well, that's not the 23rd of September, is it? That means at the end of August, all the people that are telling us about how this held together and why this shouldn't be considered and why the Boxing Board of Control of this and why the Boxing Board of Control of that. And if you've legaled up, this is supposition on my part, if you've legaled up very early, then I would imagine that legal reach extended to conversations with the Boxing Board of Control about what they can and can't say when they got information at the end of August, which might explain why the Boxing Board of Control were put in a very invidious position on the 23rd of September when they were greeted with yet another failed test.
The thing of it...
That's interesting, isn't it? Simon Jordan, this is actually the first time I've heard this today. But it looks like Simon Jordan's saying sort of similar things to what I'm saying there. Particularly about the role of the British Boxing Board of Control. Did you see there? It seemed to me like what he was saying there was, he wonders how cooperative these individuals were with the British Boxing Board of Control. Because he seems to think that there was probably a lot of legal action going on behind the scenes. And he thinks that the British Boxing Board of Control may have had their hands tied in terms of what they could do and didn't do and what they could say and couldn't say. Have I got that right, Richard? If I had, give me a yes. Very interesting. It's the first time I've heard this. And he seems to be saying stuff that's very, very similar to what we said earlier on today. Because Eddie Hearn came out and said, oh, no, we provided all the information to the British Boxing Board of Control. And all they had to do was make a decision. And they failed to make a decision. Well, myself and Simon Jordan aren't convinced that was the case. We think that there may have been some legal people behind the scenes that may have made it very, very difficult for the British Boxing Board of Control to just turn around and say, yeah, he's failed a test, the fight's off.
It is, Simon. We're already at a stage that the landscape has changed and will not return to what it was. Ben has now revoked his British licence and he's threatened never to fight in the UK again. He says, I won't be boxing under the British board ever again. But they're building this has changed everything, regardless of the outcome.
But they're building a conspiracy theory argument now, which is the world's out to get me. I don't want Conor Benn to be guilty of drug cheating. I really like the boy.
We like him.
I want him to be exonerated. But to tear your licence up and to take a swipe at the British Boxing Board of Control and build a backstory that it's infamy, everyone's infamy, right, is nonsense. The best way to be it, you get your legal team around you if that's what you feel you need to do. You provide the B samples and you provide an answer to the question. If it's such a minute trace, how did it get in your system? It's not a difficult question to ask for someone to be asked. And it's not a difficult one for someone to answer.
The thing is, he's not the first boxer in this situation.
So there you go. That's we won't play the whole video, but that's the latest criticism from Simon Jordan. Simon Jordan there clarifying his comments about Eddie Hearn and Conor Benn. I think I'll leave it at this. I hope I haven't bollocksed up today's episode. I've tried to make it a little bit more factual than yesterday's episode. I hope I've done a semi-decent job. What I will say is this. I've made mistakes during this process. My coverage hasn't been perfect. I've probably put a little bit too much of the blame on Eddie Hearn, and I've probably neglected putting the blame on people like Kalle Sauerland, because it ain't all Eddie Hearn's fault. The British Boxing Board of Control, I've been calling them a disgrace for years. So you won't have a problem getting me to criticise the British Boxing Board of Control. I've been calling them an absolute fucking disgrace, since the fucking dinosaurs last roamed the earth. So you won't have any problems there. But I've made mistakes in my coverage. My coverage hasn't been perfect. I've got things wrong. I've got facts wrong. Maybe I've apportioned too much of the blame to Eddie Hearn. Maybe I've made mistakes. But you know what? I'm willing to come out and admit I've made mistakes. I'm willing to come out and admit that I haven't done things perfectly. I don't see the same thing coming from Conor Benn. I don't see the same thing coming from Eddie Hearn. And that's how I'll leave this. I think what people are looking for here is a bit of transparency. And that's the point that I think I'm trying to make and the point that Simon Jordan is trying to make. We want a bit of transparency. We want to know how many drug tests. Do you know we still don't know the answer to this fucking question? Can you believe this? A simple fucking question, right? How many drug tests has Conor Benn had adverse findings for? Well, if he said that, that's fine, Aldi. That's fine. How many dope tests has Conor Benn had adverse findings in? Do you know that it's now October the 28th? We still don't know the answer to this question, Allegedly, it's 2. Last week, or a couple of weeks ago, or on October the 4th, we were sure it was 1, weren't we? On October the 4th, we were sure that he'd only failed 1 test, right? 1 test, right? He was only supposed to have failed 1 test as of October the 4th, right? And we were saying, oh, no, this must be a mistake. There must be something wrong. 3 weeks later, we find out, well, it's 2 tests. Well, how many tests has he failed? How many adverse findings has he had? I mean, like I said before, the people involved aren't being very, very forthcoming and aren't being very, very transparent. We're having to find things out from the Daily Mail. Never a good sign, is it, when you're having to get your breaking news from the Daily Mail? That's when you know it's a disaster, isn't it? when you're getting your breaking news from the Daily Mail the day before a fight. I mean, I've got to be careful what I say, but talk about transparency. You should never ever be in a situation where the Daily Mail is breaking this news before you are. You shouldn't be in that situation. So people want to see a bit of transparency. And I think people's criticism of Eddie Hearn at the minute is that he isn't being very transparent at all. That's how we feel, you know? He isn't being transparent at all because what he's been doing, and the same with Kalle Sauerland, you know, their actions don't match up to their words. And that's what I'm saying. But we'll have to wait and see. Eddie Hearn versus Simon Jordan. Will it happen? I don't think Eddie wants to go on there, to be honest. I don't think he wants to go on there. I think the problem that he has with Simon Jordan in closing is that, with all due respect to Eddie, right? Eddie's not the devil or nothing like that. I'm not saying he's the devil or nothing, but Simon Jordan's a self-made man, isn't he? With all due respect, isn't he? Like, Eddie, isn't he? Eddie, what did Simon Jordan do? Simon Jordan started a business with £30,000 and sold it for 75 million. Have I got that right? That's what Simon Jordan did, yeah? Simon Jordan and his business partner had £30,000 and turned £30,000 into a business that was worth 75 million. Eddie Hearn inherited the business from his dad and went to boarding school. I ain't saying Eddie Hearn ain't good at business, but that's the truth, innit? Like, innit? That's the truth, innit? That's the truth, innit? Like, one of them's a real entrepreneur, innit? Who built himself up from scratch. One of them is a real wheeler dealer, innit? What do you think? Do you think that's a fair comment or an unfair comment? That one of these two, out of Eddie Hearn and Simon Jordan, one of these two is a real wheeler dealer who took £30,000 and turned it into 75 million, right? And then you've got the other one who, with all due respect, is a little bit of a, I don't want to say in a bad way, but do you think this is a fair comment? He's a little bit of a phony, isn't he? Do you not think? I mean, look at this book. Relentless. 12 rounds to success. Who do you think's more qualified to write a book about being a self-made businessman and being relentless in the world of business? Who do you think's more entitled to write a book called Relentless? Simon Jordan, a man who turned £30,000 into 75 million, or Eddie Hearn? A man who inherited an already successful business from his millionaire father. Yeah, and made it more successful. I'm not questioning that. I'm not saying Eddie Hearn didn't make Matchroom more successful, but can you see the difference here, innit? Between Simon Jordan and Eddie Hearn. One of them's a real wheeler dealer, isn't he? You know? One of them's a real market trader. One of them can really take a lemon and make lemonade out of it, innit? And one of them is a bit of a fake, innit? Look. GQ interviews. You're taking pictures like this, and then you're asking people out for fights. Well, what are you? Are you I mean, look. 1 minute you're in GQ magazine looking like this. Next minute you're calling people out for fights. Which one is it? What are you? Are you the boxer? Are you the ex-boxer tough guy promoter from Essex? Are you this thing that we can see here in GQ magazine? Or are you Mr. Successful Relentless Businessman who definitely didn't have a rich dad to help you along the way? Which one are you, like? Seems like you're trying to be all things at once, innit? He can't make up his mind, like. What is he? Are you the cheeky chappy? Little bit way. For those of you who used to watch the Fast Show. Are you the cheeky chappy? Cheeky little Essex man? Or are you this guy? What are you? What are you? The ex-boxer who now wants to get in the ring for a charity fight? You know, it's funny, isn't it? He always wants to get in a charity fight with people who can't box. Do you know what? You know when Jake Paul called him out? Did he ask Jake Paul out for a charity fight? Can I just leave it at that as well? Just out of interest. Where's his charity fight with Jake Paul? Is that happening? Do you know the one where Jake Paul turned around and accused him of being corrupt? Did he ever ask out Jake Paul for a charity fight? Did that ever happen? I never see him suggest a charity boxing fight with Jake Paul. Strange that, isn't it? Simon Jordan, yeah, it's not a problem. Frank Smith, he'll get in a ring with Frank Smith, won't he? He'll get in a ring with Frank Smith on camera. He'll get in a ring with fucking Simon Jordan. But when Jake Paul says things that are 10 times worse, all of a sudden his energy changes, doesn't he? You don't have the same energy. When it's Jake Paul, he just gets the lawyers involved, doesn't he? Must be this Eddie here, Lawyer Eddie, innit? Lawyer Eddie. It's this Eddie, innit? Look. Lawyer Eddie. When it's Jake Paul that's calling him out, he's this guy, isn't he? This is him in his let me get the lawyers pose. When Simon Jordan calls him out, he switches up then, doesn't he, innit? He's a different guy, innit? When Simon Jordan turns out, he turns into this guy, didn't he? Eddie Hills. He turns into his alter ego, didn't he? Eddie Hills. Ex-amateur boxer. 3-0 from Billikere Boxing Club. I'll tell you what, Simon. Why don't we have a charity boxing fight? We can sort it out. He changes, doesn't he? He becomes Eddie Hills. He grows a beard, and then he becomes Eddie Hills, the ex-amateur boxer. When it's Frank Smith or when it's Frank Smith or Simon Jordan, when he's up against guys that he thinks he can beat, he's Eddie Hills, isn't he? When he's up against Jake Paul, all of a sudden he turns into turns into GQ Eddie. Which one are you, man? I can't make it out. Anyway, take care of yourselves and each other. Peace out.